Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our next Digi-Live. My name is Winston Thomas, and I will be your host for the first half of this program. My colleague Paul Ma will take over for the second half. So for the past 2 years, we have been holding Digi-Live sessions. The response from our audience has been quite favorable. What is a Digi-Live? It is a deep dive of a specific topic using 2 panels, featuring industry practitioners as well as solution providers. We often take 2 different perspectives to cover a certain topic. This is slightly different from our annual summits, where we will cover a variety of subject matters, which we feel are important for CDOs. We often work closely with a solution provider for each of this Digi-Live panel session, as I believe that they actually add a unique perspective as the vendor-customer relationship evolves, as you will know. Today, we are lucky to be working closely with Automation Anywhere, and we appreciate their support. For this Digi-Live, we will be talking about automation. At CDOTrends, we have definitely seen that definition of automation change. 3 years ago, when you say automation, it was about business efficiency and cost control. Many employees used to view it suspiciously as a human worker replacement effort. To be frank, many were. But today, after a year and a half of weathering the pandemic, the idea of automation has changed. It is seen as an employee enabler, as companies are looking to see how they can increase productivity while having a very fixed headcount. For business leaders, automation, especially AI-driven automation, is about business survival as well. The agility it offers allows them to navigate a market that is increasingly chaotic while recalibrating their business models. It also allows the human workforce to be more productive where it counts, like making decisions which only humans can. These are areas that we will be talking about today. But before we begin, 2 things to note. This Digi-Live sessions is about learning through engagement. So while we have a panel discussion, I would like to encourage everyone to send in their questions. All you have to do is use the Q&A button, not the chat button, the Q&A button to send in your questions. And we will look to answer as many as possible. Just keep it interactive and flowing. Also, in the first session, the first 3 valid questions will receive an attractive prize. Just a bit of a motivation for you all. So, without much ado, and I'm sure we are all looking forward to our first session, let's begin. First, I would like to highlight what are we going to talk about. Today, the theme of this panel discussion for the next 55 minutes would be about improving business outcomes through automation. What does that really mean? That's what our panelists down here are here to answer through varied questions. And as I mentioned before, please do ask your questions because you will have different perspectives. Let me introduce the participants today. We have first Dr. Lisa Patvivatsiri, Chief Transformation Officer from Thai Group Holdings. She's joining us all the way from Thailand. We have Tuang Cheng, affectionately known as Casey. He's the Chief Operating Officer for Automation and Workforce Strategy coming from Credit Suisse. And lastly, we have SK Lau, Vice President for Consulting and Customer Success from Automation Anywhere, who will be offering his learnings, experience, as well as what he has gained out of talking to other customers. So thank you all for coming, and let's have a good discussion.
Morning.
So maybe we can start with a quick question. I mentioned earlier on that automation is always seen as a job killer, but has that attitude changed over the last 1.5 years? Maybe Casey, let me pose that question to you.
Yeah, I do see a change in the perception. Let's put it this way, and actually it largely got to do with the organization, how they actually kind of try to actually tackle this particular issue. I think one of the main thing is really about if you have some sort of senior management walking the talk, holding town halls, educating people, what is the objective. I think that lends a lot of weight, in terms of, this particular topic.
Do you see, you mentioned senior management, do you see senior management getting more involved? Because now automation is going to be there. It's going to be part of parcel of life, and it's going to be part of the workforce as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think we started off our so-called automation journey probably about 6-7 years ago. And one of the key things that we have is really about setting up the governance, the framework, as well as identifying who are the key stakeholders. So we make sure that the senior management are there, behind us, pushing us through, and then we get all the necessary support, whether or not it's actually from a funding perspective or from resources or support perspective. They are there to actually lend their weight, and it makes the journey a lot better, and it kind of became one of the focus for the organization as well.
Okay, Dr. Lisa, what about yourself?
Yeah, for me, I think, yeah, in the previous day, I think everyone thinking like the robot is a job killer. But I think for nowadays, if any organization that already have been implemented RPA, I think they realize that the robot is their digital co-worker. Once they already implement the RPA, they will understand more that I think it's a basic instinct that no one would like to work on the very tedious job, the repetitive job. So when they got the robot they can hand over this repetitive job to this robot. It can help them to focus on their activity that they is more value added, that they can focus on the customer service. They can focus on the customer analytics or whatever that the robot cannot do. So in my opinion, I think right now, job killer may not the wording in this era, but I think the digital co-worker is maybe the good wording for the RPA.
So it's interesting, you mentioned digital co-worker. Do you see an attempt that you need to change the mindset of your workforce to actually see them as a co-worker?
It's a good question. I think to implement the RPA, it's not only you select the right technology, you select the right process. Actually, you need to build the right culture and the learning. This is something that a lot of organizations may forgot to do it at the beginning of the journey. So that's why it's become to be the failure of the RPA implementation. How you gonna make your staff really understand how this RPA can help their life better? This is very important. I don't know. I think there are a lot of ways to do, but from my experience, I start from the bottom up. I encourage all the staff in the organization understand how RPA works, and if we have the RPA, if we have the robot, how their life gonna be better. And that is the way how we're going to build the culture of the organization.
We'll dive into that culture part later on. I think it's a really important aspect of automation. But let's move to SK. SK, you've been talking to a lot of customers. Has the conversation from a vendor perspective changed from, let's say, 1.5 years ago?
Yeah, I think over the years, right? I mean, 1.5, 2 years ago, RPA is pretty new, right? Not many people understand what is RPA, what is automation, and what's the impact, right? I think that's a key one. And now I think when we engage customers, right, a lot of customers actually have quite a fair bit of knowledge of what is RPA, what automation, what the benefits it can bring, and a lot of times they understand that it's really not a job killer. Right, and understand, right, when we speak to a lot of customers, especially for the operations folks, lower level workers, they have concerns, right? But we find that when we engage, when we implement automation, the fact is that automation actually doesn't replace jobs, right? It replaces mundane tasks within jobs, right? And leave you with doing, let's say, higher level, let's say, decision making, more creative work. I think it basically brings out the the potential of human beings, right? I think that that's one key thing, and I think it also brings a better quality of life, right? So I think through a lot of discussion, and I think the key thing here is, especially in the organizations, right? The buy-in from the senior executives are very key, right? And education and communication and change management is very key, right? They need to understand why the company is doing that, right? Usually it's part of digital transformation, right? The workforce transformation is part of digital transformation, and the employees needs to understand why the company needs to do that. And I think the company, in terms of part of change management, they also need to be aware that it's not just technology change, but also processes and also people, right? And they also need to put in a place, right? How do you reskill the workers, right? How do you redesign the job roles, right? And communicate clearly what's the benefit the employees is going to get out of this, right? You're going to upskill, you get better career advancements and all this. I think that will actually bring a lot of reduce the amount of pushback from the employees. So over the years, to answer your question, yes, there's a lot of a change when especially employees now better understand automation. It brings a better quality of life to themselves personally. I think that reduces a lot of pushback.
Okay, thanks, SK. And before I move on to Casey, just want to highlight to people who have just joined us, we are now actually talking about having a panel discussion, a fruitful panel discussion about improving business outcomes through automation. And I would like to invite everyone to use the Q&A button to submit their questions, because we want to keep this as interactive as possible. Moving to Casey, SK mentioned a very good point in terms of taking away the mundane task, making jobs much more fruitful. Casey, you are in an industry where people are actually leaving because they really do not want the workload, especially in those areas where there's return to workplace policies. Companies, banks, investment banks especially, are struggling to get their junior workers in. They just simply do not want to work those hours. And a lot of it is actually repetitive tasks, because that's part of the analysis. How is that changing your job positioning within the workforce?
Yeah, actually it changes quite a few. I still recall, before we actually had RPA, there's generally this particular approach on outsourcing. So essentially, I mean, if you look at it, typically the process that are actually being selected for outsourcing are actually, very straightforward, simple, repetitive. And then typically what happens is that the organization will actually kind of identify a low-cost location and start shipping it out. And that kind of create fear within the workforce. People knows that sooner or later my process will be selected, and and then my job will be lost. Another thing is that some of the what we also seen is that some of these processes, being a global organization, we actually support email as well as the US hours kind of processes. So again, there's a requirement for people to actually work shift work, and and it doesn't kind of help to actually contribute to the work-life balance. Now with RPA coming in, it kind of disrupt the whole thing. We started off to actually rethink about our outsourcing strategy. Do we want to actually move all these processes to a low-cost location, or can we actually kind of use RPA to actually substitute some of this? And at the same time, we are also having a very what we think as a very good proposition. The staff that's actually in the organization, they take ownership of their process. So rather than dealing with another team, which is again subjected to manual mistakes and things like that, they are now responsible for the process. They design their own processes. They design how they want to actually see the exceptions. And bots having that reliability, to actually create less error, actually help to actually complement the whole kind of processes that they actually have, and that reduce the working hours. And then one good thing, bots work 24 hours. So, even if they go out for lunch, the bot continues to work. And then they have oversight of the process, they manage the exceptions. So that to me kind of like, really turn the kind of like, the processes around for us.
Okay, that's interesting. Dr. Lisa, your perspective, because, it's very difficult for employees to see from a senior management perspective why they should be working that hard. But do you see automation actually improving their the way they look at what they need to do, their work appreciation, and overall, is that doing well for the workforce?
Yes, yes. I think just to more address on what Casey just mentioned. I think one thing is you give them a show, you give them the real thing. To prioritize what you select for the RPA, that is a very challenge that gonna make your RPA journey successful. One of the things that we did when we start off with this journey, we select the process that this is a process that the finance guy need to be clocked in every morning, 8:30 in the morning, and also again on the 1 p.m. after lunch. They need to do this twice a day, every single day. And what they did is take him about 45 minutes round at each time. We use the robot to clock in for him, clock in at the after lunch for him. After that, he no longer needs to do this job. But we did not fire him. He asked himself to reskin himself and move to the another department, move to the another job. And that is a role model for the organization, because everyone know that this guy needs to be here at 8:30 every day, 1 p.m. every day. And once they no longer need to do that job, and they can move to do the better job, the job that you can see he smile every day. He love, he have the happy life. I think that is something is a showcase for the organization, that you don't need to fire anyone. You just have the robot replace something that the human don't need to do, and you can move the human to do another job that human need to do. So that is rather than get the engagement from the SMT, you can make the showcase to the all staff for them as well.
Okay, thanks. And CK, I just wanted to ask a question which coming from the audience, which I think it's quite poignant for this discussion, is how can we get our workforce sufficiently trained to be able to understand business needs and RPA programs so that we can streamline these processes? Based on your conversation with all the organizations, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think let me just look at the question again. How to get our workforce sufficiently trained to understand the business needs. I think this is part of the change management process, right? I think the key thing depends on the department, right? They need to understand what are the processes that can be automated that is taking up most of their time, that is repetitive and mundane. And I think in terms of RPA, right, what we usually do is we conduct workshops, right, like board building workshops, or even conduct auditathons, right, to let the employees understand how easy it is to build a digital worker and how does it benefit their work, right, and improve their quality of life. I think it's pretty much hands-on. We have all these workshops that can help, that we work with organizations, right, implementing all these activities to let them have a hands-on experience, right, to understand how this software bots or digital workers help in their work, right. I think that's part of the training program that we can work with organizations to implement. With regards to understand business needs, I think the business owners themselves, the stakeholders, right, as they embark on this digital workforce journey, right, they need to understand what they should be able to communicate clearly to their employees, right, or their team members, right. What are business benefits of undergoing all this of implementing digital workforce, right? So it works hand in hand, right? Both the company themselves working together with the vendors, right? In terms of educating and training their team members.
Thanks. Dr. Lisa, earlier on you mentioned that you look at it from a grassroots level and you're actually training some of your employees to appreciate like RPA and understand the need for having a co-worker, digital work co-worker. I'm just wondering, is there a set program that you have, or is this a case-by-case basis? Or do you work with a vendor to actually create such a program and roll it out?
It's a good question. Actually, to be honest to you, when we start off this journey, I also very innocent to the RPA. I just, how RPA come up to our organization, actually the first thing is come up because only the simple question, how we're going to make the customer satisfaction. I think in today's market, it's quite very obvious that the customer, they do not longer buy the product, but they want to buy the experience. So our management executive are seriously brainstorm on how we're going to improve the customer satisfaction. And then we come to this forward. It's just like empathy, how we really understand what they need. When they call to our call center, they try to say anything, how our agent can have focus to understand what they want. They want it anytime. They want it fast, and they want it with the accuracy. Once we come up to the answer of the RPA, this is quite a new toy to me on that time, and I quite very innocent on that. So how I start the program is just instinct. It's just like we need to let them understand what the RPA is, and then they can help us to do that. We think about 3 models over that time. Build, how we're going to build our internal staff to do this by ourselves, or we should engage the vendor. But absolutely, we cannot engage the vendor forever. So we come to the last model we call hybrid. We engage the partner. The vendor help us nurturing on the beginning of the journey, and then after that we grow up by ourselves and do it by our own. So I think vendor is the one also who just give me the trick that how you're gonna get our staff realize this value, and that's why it's become to the program that okay, we should start from the bottom up. We call the cross-functional meeting. We educate them, we demo to them, we show them, and then we ask them go back to their business area. Ask them to nominate the process that they think the RPA can help them. Surprisingly, we got the nomination about 400 process candidates. It's to me, it's very wow. Even some of them is very funny. Some of them send me like they want the robot to take the meeting minute to me. I just like, oh, this is not the Doraemon, the robot cat, something like that. But I think at least they show me the side that they want to go along with this journey with us, and that's the beginning of this program.
Yes, once they realize the benefits, they would like to see how much they can actually optimize it. CK, from your side, Casey, sorry. From your side, where do you actually start with automation programs or RPA in your company?
We actually start off with the within operations. I think what happened was that we actually have a framework in place. So I mean, on the very high level, I think the frameworks focus on the due diligence first. When we talk about due diligence, we actually formulate a checklist in terms of what are the kind of key elements of suitability analysis on the processes itself. Things that are repetitive, the data are being structured, so on and so forth, are generally good candidates for RPA solution. And then as part of the due diligence, we actually take into account the strategic kind of enhancement in place as well. So we look at the various system roadmap is this something that the strategy system is going to kind of like implement in about, let's say, 2 years time, and then what is the payback period? So that kind of like framework due diligence is actually being performed first before we actually kind of like bring about all these kind of like selections. And then once the process has been selected, we do have a governance in place where we bring these use cases up to the steering committee for approval. And then from there, obviously the benefit case, the business case is actually being discussed, as well as we give them the kind of like the views in terms of what is the exit strategy, and stuff like that. And then once that one is done, then you will follow the typical SDLC kind of like processes. It get delivered.
Okay, interesting. Do you see then senior management perception of RPA helping employees change as well? Because a lot of projects, to be frank, when it goes to the senior management level, when you're asking for budget, it's all about ROI and looking at making sure you have the ability to cut costs. Essentially, that's about efficiency, operational efficiency. But do they see now that you are actually increasing the value proposition of having an employee because of RPA?
Yeah, definitely you're right. I think the key thing is really about positioning. You mentioned about cost cutting. I mean, definitely some people see RPA as some sort of like cost cutting kind of like program. I mean, I wouldn't deny that. But on the other hand, you can also position it as some sort of like business enablement. So when we talk about business enablement, we are talking about doing more for less, or even doing more for the same resources that we actually have. So this is where we start to actually expand the capabilities outside of my current organization. We look at potentially the sales, front office sites. What are the mundane stuff that they're actually doing, and then we being the expert in this particular case, right? We don't need them to actually go through the whole process about identifying the framework. We have all this in place. So it's really about discussion between the various businesses. How about you moving some of this mundane stuff over to us? We will actually automate it with our end, and then we have kind of like sufficient data to show that we are doing it well, and then you can actually focus your time on reaching out to clients, getting more revenue and stuff like that. So that's the approach that we do, and the management has certainly shared my view as well.
Okay, SK, from your perspective, when you talk to, as you work with a lot of customers, where do you see essentially RPA, they're starting an RPA project? And just to add on to that, could you also explain, do you need a center of excellence to actually drive and scale in such an RPA project?
Yeah, to answer your last question, yes, the Center of Excellence or COE is actually pretty critical, right? We see a lot of projects going well in the pilot phase, but without a good COE setup, a lot of projects just fizzles off, right? And they just basically stop at the pilot phase. So the COE is important, right? The COE setup basically comprises of the business stakeholders, IT to look at security, compliance, right? The business unit stakeholders, right? They own this, right? They have the interest to drive this forward. So to answer your question, yes, the COE is actually very critical. The senior executives buy-in is also very critical, right? One pitfall that a lot of companies experience is they have not got their senior executives buy-in, because implementing digital workforce is a company-wide initiative. It's a company-wide strategy, right? Because it impacts not just particular process, it impacts people's career, people's life, right? And as a result, we need to look at it holistically, right? So yeah, so I hope that answers your question. So basically, we need senior executives buy-in. We need COE setup, right, to make sure we scale beyond the initial pilot phase. That is very critical, right? So that the larger you can scale the RPA initiative, right, or more process being automated, your ROI becomes higher and higher.
Okay.
Right. So that's where you get the most benefit as you scale up using RPA.
So here's a question. Basically, in terms of where we want to start an RPA project, should you look for an easy process to automate so that you can show it's a small win and then grow from there? Or should you look for a, not say a big bang project, but a project that gives you the most, it might be complex, but it gives you the most bang for the buck, that will convince the management, hey, RPA really does give you a lot of benefits. Where do you begin?
Right, yeah. I think just now Casey shared some of his experience, and is glad to hear that his organization has a pretty mature setup, right, in terms of driving this, right? For those just starting on the RPA journey, right, typically what we do, right, once we get the senior executives buy-in, what we usually do with the customer is we run a couple of what we call process discovery workshops, right? Do note that RPA is not just tailored specifically for particular functions or particular verticals, right? It spans across, right? It could be finance, HR, operations, anything, right? Anything that has business, that has mundane repetitive process can be automated. So what we usually do is we run this process discovery workshops, right? Basically, we go department by department, ask them to bring in their most painful process on the table, and we basically do analysis, right? Based on the complexity, based on the number of hours taken to do the job, how frequent this task is being done. Is it multiple times a day, once a week, once a month? All right, how many people are doing? How many man hours you need to spend on the job, right? So I mentioned complexity, and also whether it is a mature process, right? Mature process means a process that is stable. It doesn't change a lot, right? Because if a mature process changes a lot, it will be very difficult to automate it, right? So once we do all these workshops with the different departments, we'll do analysis, right? And we actually usually we propose a customer not to go with a big bang approach. Typically after the workshops, right, we can get probably more than 50 processes, right? You can't possibly automate everything, right, in one shot. And typically the suggestion we go with is we go in sprints, right? So basically with a pilot, once the pilot is completed successfully, we go to the sprint number 2, 3, and so on. It can spread over multiple quarters, right? Depending on the amount of resources the customer has, right? And usually the pilot, what we suggest is the lowest hanging fruit, right? The simplest process that gives the most ROI, right? From all the, let's say 50 odd process, right? We will shortlist maybe 5 to 10 process for the pilot, right? These are the lowest hanging fruit that gives the ROI. I think that early success is important, right? To give the company and then the staff the confidence, right? And they can see the benefit and ROI immediately. I think that will boost the confidence, right, and ensure success in the later phases.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, XK. Dr. Lisa, I just wanted to bring you into that discussion, but I'm just wondering from your experience, as you see appreciation of RPA growing in your organization, where would you not start RPA in, based on your learnings and your experience with RPA?
Where we would not start the RPA. I think you should not start the RPA if your senior management still don't appreciate how RPA can do. Because just to emphasize what SK just mentioned as well, I think to make the RPA success, the first thing you nail down your SMT. You nail down your senior management team. They really understand how the RPA works. The second one, the executive or the senior management should be careful on the communication message to the organization as well. When we start off this RPA, we gossip to them. We just tell them that don't use the wording something like remove the head count, release the person, the sensitive wording that gonna create the insecure feeling to the staff, they should stop doing that. And the third one is for me now, I think you should not start the complex the process that very complex, because the fastest that you can implement the showcase is the fastest way that you can get the people appreciate on the value of the RPA.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lisa. Casey, I just wanted to go to you. Dr. Lisa was talking about how senior management is important to get them on board an RPA journey. And in terms of making sure, and also SK was also talking about the same thing, making sure you have the right culture to support and in fact to scale an RPA journey or project. I'm just wondering from your perspective, how important is change management getting involved right at the beginning of an RPA project?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting topic. I mean, I think if I look back at my own experience right now, right, it's definitely quite critical. And, you know, we were actually trying to actually address that, when we started off setting up the Center of Excellence. One of the things that we keep debating, you know, internally was that, you know, should this be something of a citizen developer tool? You know, I said that, the end user themselves doing the coding, or we should be engaging, IT, resources. I think my personal view at that point in time, 6-7 years ago, was that, it should be a self-developer tool. So we get the people to work on it, pretty much like your, macros, BPAs. You identify the, you are the process owner, you identify the processes, and then we give you a platform to do it. But then it was shut down, this idea. So we move on to an IT kind of like support model, and looking back now, it was actually the right decision, because change management is actually one key part. We actually started to realize that the initial use cases that you do, as part of the automation, may be actually small in scale, but as we gradually matured, we started to actually look at the process, front to back. We look at the bots that we have actually created, years ago, and then we try to actually combine them into one stream. So right now we actually have bots that's actually helping, the front office, back to operations, certain departments, making whole that workflow chain itself. And then change management is actually quite a critical part because of the involvement of IT. So we became a little bit more kind of like agile. We prioritize, which are the use cases that should go first. Looking at and then we hold workshops to actually tell people the concept of MVP, minimum viable product. What is the expectations, and obviously, I think the focus became a lot more on how we manage the exceptions, with the bots. Rather than building a flow, which is what we term as a happy flow. Happy flow is easy to be developed, but then I think most of the time the pitfalls is really about how do we actually manage all these exceptions, and then getting the users, getting some so-called data MIs out of those. That is where we focus a lot of the effort right now.
Okay, a quick question: when you automate, let's say a job, part of the job, and you actually free up the person to do value-added tasks, that is obviously one of the main benefits of RPA that has always been promoted across. But it is difficult, and I've talked to organizations where they feel that the organizational structure does not actually support this, because you have a free person who can do more elevated tasks, but not necessarily the section head will allow the person to move to another section or division because the person is free to do other tasks. So how important is in that kind of context to actually get, since you're dealing with the workforce, getting HR and even the CEO involved in an RPA journey to make sure that people actually can move laterally?
I think probably, I don't know, probably it's a fortunate thing that the organization that I'm in is actually quite large, or rather the departments that I'm in is actually quite large. So there's always, there's always this pipeline of work that we wanted to do, which is the value added stuff, but then where we don't actually have the resources to do it. So it was always the case that, if I put it bluntly, previously it was really about, firefighting. BAU stuff, people need to actually get all these kind of like, completed, before the sunset, and things like that. But then with this, and then we have a very strong kind of like, top-down approach where, the managers was actually being encouraged to actually move people around as well.
Okay.
We set up the COE, and then one of the things that we did was that we actually showcased. When we talk about showcasing, once a process has been automated, we actually invite the person that was actually kind of like impacted to come up and talk about their journey. I think it has a very, very strong kind of like message. Number one, the guy is still within the organization. Number two, there's actually a very strong recognition and very strong support from the management that we wanted to do this. And then the person was actually able to actually articulate right now what is their previous role, what is their current role today, what actually has changed. And then all these are one of the things that we also work with HR is that these are the kind of like transferable skill sets. No matter where you move within the organization, it's definitely going to be very, very valuable, at least from an individual perspective.
Thanks. Dr. Lisa, what about your experience in terms of making the employee base slightly more, how to say, transferable to different departments? Is that going to be a big challenge from your side?
I think if your organization is very big, it can be the room to transfer people across the department. But if your organization is not that big, I think this is a big challenge because it may be hard to transfer the people across the department. But I think for me, it's not totally about transfer the people across to the another department. One thing that you can do it is you have the your business relation can be the headcount optimization. You freeze the headcount. You say that if someone resigns, you don't replace. The one thing that you can survive, you need to use the automation. You need to use the digital workforce. This is the way that actually our organization practice on this thing as well. We said that for the some area we do like the group hot I don't know what to call it later. We identify the group of the department, which department we allow for the replacement, which department we not allow for the replacement. So the one that we not allow for the replacement, the only way that they can do, they need to use the digital workforce. So this is the way that they can do it. The another way is we do upskill, but when we do upskill, we do upskill inside the department. What I mean is when you implement the RPA, you need two persons, very key two persons. The first one is the business analyst, the one who really understand the process and can do the process mapping, can do the process blueprint, who design the blueprint. For the second key person, which is the RPA developer, who do the developer for the RPA and implement the RPA tool. So the another thing that we can do is we upskill the person in that department to be the BA. No one understands the process better than the process owner. So you already have the good person inside the department. You just upskill them how to make them to be the business analyst. And then for the RPA development, this is depend on your model. You can have them COE into the one team as well. Or if you think that you can reskill the person to be the developer, that is another thing as well. So I think it's two ways to do it for the people thing to scale up the RPA.
Thank you, Dr. Lisa. SK, do you have additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Lisa brought up a few pretty good points, right? How to reskill the workers and so on. I think that is very key, right? We work with many customers. For example, they redesign the job scope, right? As what Lisa mentioned, board developers, business analysts, or even board managers, right? Or digital workers managers, right? So I think that is very key. And I think all this should be part of, how would I say, part of the career development of their team members, integrated and communicate to the team members, right? As part of career development, these are, right, what are the new types of jobs or roles or redesign roles is available, right? And these are the training to get you there, right? I think once you have that, I think and the employees see the benefit, right, in terms of career advancement, right, better opportunities, right, I think they will get on board, right? And that is a very critical part, right, on the people side.
Thanks. Casey, quick one. You mentioned about, just now explained about how you actually, Credit Suisse actually looks into RPA. I'm just wondering, should we look at RPA as a tech project, or is it better if it is looking as a business project, because we are really talking about business processes?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, right? I think the way that we actually do it is that we see it somehow of of a tech project. We have the IT developers that's coming in, and there's actually a very strong rationale why we actually do this. Because I think, I mean, if I look at my current so-called end user kind of like workforce itself, some of them may be more techy than the others. They understand a little bit more, and depending on the platform they're actually using, some of them is actually what we term as a low-code automation. Some of them is actually it's actually a little bit more technical in nature. So these users, they are there. They probably will excel in the role. But if you look at the general population of the business users themselves, they are really not that technical in nature. And then we do adopt a longer term kind of like outlook. We want this RPA to be able to actually hook up, link up to some of our businesses core system itself. And then what we have also done, when I look at my journey again, RPA is just one of the many capabilities that we actually have. We are kind of like integrating it with OCR, ICR, NLP, natural language processing, dashboarding tools, workflow tools. So it became a whole new kind of like ecosystem. And then with that, we actually felt that IT resources are able to actually provide that level of so-called stability. They can actually source for the right resources to support this tool. And then these actually better sits with them in the organization.
Okay, Dr. Lisa, quick one. Do you see it as a tech project, or do you position it as a business project?
I think this is a good question, actually. I think it's a hybrid. To me, it's a hybrid. It's the original is come from the business process. Actually, it should be the business project, but it's a combination of the technical guy who needs to develop the RPA as well. To me, from our experience, we design this team out of the IT. We set up the new team, and we call the business transformation team. We put the people, is a BA, they are the business user, and we put the people from the technical guy, is a developer, but we put them together, sit together, because they need to talk to each other. They cannot just get the work order from the business and do it. It's not something like that. It's like a hybrid. And importantly, for the RPA implementation, we need to make it agile way. You need to make it done by 4 weeks. So it's the way that you can have the collaborative talk to each other between the business analyst and the RPA guy.
Okay, thanks. And now I'd like to turn the virtual floor to SK. I'd like to hear from SK on how, because when we talk about RPA, this has evolved over time. It's not a rigid or fixed technology. There's a lot of technology development that's going on down there, as well as how people like SK works with these customers has also changed with RPA development. So let's hear from SK on further on about this. I think he has a short presentation on this.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Winston, and thanks, Casey and Lisa. Right, I think my session will be more like a wrap up or summary of what we have discussed. Definitely, Casey, Lisa has shared a lot of details, but I think it's good to do a quick summary of what we have discussed. So let me just share my slide. Okay, let me know if you can't see this. All right. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So let me start off with a couple of news clippings and reports that I've seen, right, to actually share with you, right, what are the key benefits of going with digital workforce, right? So this is actually a study, right, that finds that studies the productivity of a typical worker, right? And usually we say we work around 8 hours a day, but research shows that typically it's much less than that, right? So this is one of the study. The other one is mistakes can be costly, right? Accuracy is important and mistakes can be costly, right? So this company, because just a simple Excel mistake, right, literally cost the company millions of dollars, right? And the other one is closer to home, right? So this one over in Singapore, right, where we see in this case that employee, right, it's a compliance issue, and I think this person was tempted, right, to take advantage, right? And these are all, I mean, what we are trying to say is that human is not perfect, right? And digital workers can fill in the gaps, right? So you can see that over here, digital workers, right? We can operate 7x24, we can eliminate errors, which can be costly. It allows better compliance and accuracy, right? So what it does for digital workers, it takes away the mundane, repetitive tasks, right? And does it much better than humans can do. And leaving behind the human doing what humans do best, which is making strategic decisions, all right, things that requires innovative, creative thinking, all right, that requires customer engagement. These are what software or even AI can't do, right? So what we see in the future of work is, as what Lisa has mentioned, right? Co-workers, right? Digital co-workers, right? We have human and digital workers working hand in hand, right? To raise the whole productivity of the company, right? In their workforce. And we also discussed, right, at the bottom here, we see that we discussed, right, it needs a company-wide strategy, right, right from the senior executives or leadership team, right, they need to have that change management process in place. They need to communicate well and educate their team. And ultimately, the outcome for this is it improves the top line, right, because you have human workers doing all this creative, innovative work. You have better products and services, right? You have better customer experience, right? All this will help to increase revenue of the company. But also at the same time, it improves the bottom line, right? Which a lot of, all of us understand, right? Costs, right? It reduces the cost, improve the productivity, eliminate errors, right? That will improve the bottom line. And ultimately, I think key thing is a lot of companies now, especially in the current COVID situation, and especially in the digital world, right? We need to have that competitive edge, right? And that is the key benefit. So, so let me touch a bit on what typically a customer will look at, all right? A company will look at when they assess what kind of solutions or RPA platform they should go for, right? And I think it falls under 3 key buckets, right? First, it must be an enterprise grade product, right? It cannot be designed for a single desktop. It must be enterprise grade. First of all, it must be scalable, right? And to scale fast, right? It must be easy to use, easy to build bots, right? And the solution must be designed for business users and citizen developers. At the same time, catering for hardcore techies, right? Developers and so on. And the other thing a lot of customers are looking now is how do I deploy it faster, right? Especially in the cloud, right? So in the cloud, what happens is that you don't need to purchase equipment, right? You don't need to set up infrastructure. You just basically just purchase a license or subscription, right? And then you can get the solution immediately. So the cloud native solution is important, right, for fast deployment and lower operational costs, right? So that's one bucket. The second thing is, of course, security, right? Because all these bots are doing could be sensitive business process, finance, HR, and so on. So you need enterprise-grade security and encryption, and you need to have role-based access control, right? For example, a bot that does finance process, right? You need to give the bot access to certain applications and system that is specific for that particular task, right? So this is what we call role-based access control. And the last one is, of course, governance and control, right? You need some kind of central monitoring and control to make sure that the bot is doing, how is it performing, right? Are there any failures? How well is it doing? The next one is, of course, audit trail is important because these bots are doing what humans are doing, right? And don't forget, bots are also developed by humans, right? It could be malicious, right? So you need that audit trail, right, for compliance, for audits, right? That audit trail is important, and of course, compliance with typical certifications or standards, right, like HIPAA, SOX, and so on. Right. So these are some of the key factors customers look at. So we discussed a lot in detail, right? What are if you're starting the journey, right? What are the 3 key steps to start that journey? Once you have the senior executive buy-in, the next step is, of course, to select the right process. So what I mentioned is, for example, we can do a process discovery workshop, right? Find out what are the manual repetitive tasks, right? It must be also rule-based and a mature process, right? And we get the right sponsorship. So once we have done that, we can, of course, do some bot building workshops to get people familiar with it, right? And I think also in terms of the implementation, the mindset also have to change from a typical IT project, from a lengthy, costly to more agile mindset, right? How to go in sprints, right? Rapid, inexpensive rollout for sprints. And lastly, the organization for success is important, right? Set up a COE that will help you scale that RPA journey, right? And of course, that stakeholders in each business unit is important, right? To help drive the success of the project. So I think just pitfalls that I observed across many years I engage with customers, right? Some of the pitfalls is that some of them don't have senior leadership buy-in. They may start off with automating a few simple processes, and typically it stops there, right? Neglecting change management, that's another pitfall, right? We need to make sure that you have the right change management process in place, especially on the human side, right? The people side. How do you help them transition, right? And how do you help them accept digital workers, right? That is very key. And then last but not least is, of course, not prioritizing the setting up of the COE, right? So these are the top 3 key pitfalls. I just want to, if I may, just share with you, right, my company purpose or mission, right? So basically, even though we are a software technology company, we are actually in the business of helping customers to transform their workforce, right? So that they become more productive and help to improve their top line and bottom line. And personally, for each individual workers, we want to change how people work, right? Instead of doing mundane, repetitive tasks, we want to bring out the potential of humans, right? Focus on creativity, innovation, customer experience, right? I think that will help to elevate and increase the productivity of the workers. All right, so with that, that wraps up mine. If you have any questions or anything that you would like me to share, feel free to reach out to me. All right, back to you, Winston.
Okay, thank you, SK. Thank you for that's a very short but concise presentation. Appreciate that. And I'm sure the audience, if you have a lot more questions, please do ask. If we can't get to you during this session, we'll try to get to you either through email or separately. First of all, again, appreciate all the questions coming in. Please do keep the questions going on. There will be another session after this.